And kicking off this list is a card that's not only just good, but fantastic. One that's seen enormous amounts of competitive play and is also frequently a guest on the TheDuelLogs with over 9 appearances on lists like this. Name them in the comments if you're the real TheDuelLogs enjoyer. Anyway, the Winged Dragon of Ra Sphere mode is a level 10 Divine Attribute Divine Beast monster with question mark attack and defense that was first released as an ultra rare from the Duelist Pack Battle City in 2015. Like another card we'll look at a little later on this list, the Winged Dragon of Ra Sphere mode cannot be special summoned, but that's actually not a problem here. Even though the sphere requires 3 tributes to normal summon, this condition is made a little easier to meet by giving you the option of tributing from either side of the field to summon. Your opponent can't target this card with effects or attacks, and either player can tribute sphere mode using its own effect to special summon the Winged Dragon of Ra from your hand or deck while ignoring its summoning conditions. That alone is pretty nifty. But when summoned by the effect of sphere mode, Ra's attack and defense are set to 4000, which is even better. During the end phase of the next turn after sphere mode is summoned, control of the Divine Ball will shift to the original owner. This means that if you tribute the Winged Dragon of Ra Sphere mode to your opponent's field during your turn, and it's still hanging around the field at the end of your opponent's turn, it'll come back to you with the option of cheating a supercharged version of your original Ra out onto the field. But as cool as this free Winged Dragon of Ra is, it isn't its awakened form that has made the Winged Dragon of Ra Sphere mode so good. Rather, this card is good for the same reason that Lava Golem and Gamecill the Sea Turtle Kaiju are good. Tributing your opponent's monsters is one of the most effective and least dangerous methods of removal. In modern Yu-Gi-Oh!, big boss monsters have more protections than the Egyptian gods have had in their anime exclusive effects. Take Raid Raptor Ultimate Falcon. This rank 10 Xyz monster has 3500 attack and multiple effects to reduce the stats of all opposing monsters without targeting. That's great for battle protection. But the kicker? Battle's one of the few ways to out Ultimate Falcon, because this monster is unaffected by other card effects. Shaking this card is hard, but you can do it instantly with Gardarla the Mystery Dust Kaiju or Cumulus the Sticky String Kaiju. But even better than these options is if your opponent has a few more bodies on board, the Winged Dragon of Ra Sphere mode can tribute 3 of your opponent's monsters at once. It'll probably get linked away or disappear through other means over the next turn, but that's a big board clear that can get rid of cards that Raigeki and Lightning Storm can't. And that's why Sphere mode has seen literal hundreds and hundreds more competitive placements than anything else we'll be discussing on this list. It really doesn't belong on a worst of list at all, and only got dragged here by the exclusivity of the Divine Attribute. While it doesn't have as many televised appearances as its Divine Brethren, the Winged Dragon Ra Sphere mode does have a few high-profile appearances during the Battle City finals of the Duel Monsters anime. What's interesting here is that in the anime, Sphere mode was not actually its own card. Instead, it was the initial form of the Winged Dragon of Ra, a beast that could only be used by duelists able to recite the ancient chant, Almighty Protector of the Sun and Sky, I beg of thee, please heed my cry. Transform thyself from orb of light and bring me victory in this fight. I beseech thee, grace our humble game, but first I shall call out thy name, the Winged Dragon of Ra. This is the inspiration behind the Ra support card, Ancient Chant, which pictures a midway stage between Sphere mode and full Ra, as the mighty Sun Beast unfurls. Helpfully, in the anime, this chant was written on the card. Less helpfully, it was written in an ancient script, unreadable to almost everyone save the representatives of the Tombkeeper clan, the Pharaoh, and the Odd Dark Spirit. This would prove catastrophic during Yami Merrick's duel against Mai Valentine in the first rounds of the finals. Understanding the unstoppable power of her opponent, Mai's strategy hinged around depriving him of it. She stole his copy of the Winged Dragon of Ra using the graveyard effect of Amazonas Chain. She probably would have won too if she had just held on to it. But for the plot and character reasons that both make sense, Yami Merrick was the big bad of the season and had to hang around, and Mai, proud of her strength and conscious of her reputation as a skilled duelist, Mai made the unfortunate, fatal mistake of summoning the Winged Dragon of Ra. She tributed her 3 Harpy Lady sisters for a glowing gold sphere when she expected a Divine Dragon. The Winged Dragon of Ra did wind up unfurling, but for Yami Merrick, who was able to retake control of his beast by reciting the chant, but only after mocking Mai for her inability to harness the ancient forces, which she naively dabbled in. This duel took place during episodes 90 through 92 and ended with Mai strapped to a massive stele, which Ra's Blaze Cannon attack thundered toward her. Joey Wheeler would throw his body as a shield to protect her from the onslaught, but couldn't save Mai from the dark fate of losing the Shadow Game. Yami Merrick would use his Millennium Rod to banish her mind to a dimension tailored to her own torment, where she was forced to watch all of her friends have fun at the beach without her, a sadistic move that played on her deepest insecurities of never belonging to any circle. Confronted with the same isolation that both saved her at a young age and plagued her adult life, Mai would slumber fitfully until the defeat of Yami Merrick. Although she would awaken with her trademark smirk and competent facade, her harrowing experience in the Shadow Realm would haunt her going forward, causing her to regress into a state of withdrawn bitterness that left her vulnerable to the manipulations of darts and the seal of Orichalcos. But that's later. Let's move back to the gods. Did you know that the Winged Dragon of Raw Sphere mode is one of 2 monsters with question mark attack and defense that's always 0 because it doesn't detail conditions under which its stats might be defined? If you didn't know, well, you do now. Do you know the other monster? It's coming up later in this list, so don't fall asleep. Or do, rest is important. Crushing the competition to land at the low spot of number 9 is Obelisk the Tormentor. The dual monster war god of ancient Egypt, its original, not tournament playable printing bore the evocative flavor text, "The descent of this mighty creature shall be heralded by burning winds and twisted land. And with the coming of this horror, those who draw breath shall know the true meaning of eternal slumber." Among all the gods, Obelisk best earns the pizzazz and flair of its description and saw a considerable amount of competitive play following its initial promo printing in the January 2010 issue of Shonen Jump and wider release with the next year's Gold Series 4 Pyramid Edition. Like the other core gods, it's a level 10 divine beast, but instead of having variable stats, Obelisk sits at a walloping inconsistent total of 4,000 attack and defense to back up its elite status. Obelisk was the first god to get a play legal printing in the TCG, and would begin the pattern of imperfectly adapting effects and characteristics from the anime. Unfortunately, the IRL version of the first Egyptian god would prove faithful to the anime summon conditions and restrictions. Like the other gods soon to come, Obelisk would require 3 tributes to normal summon, and would send itself to the graveyard during the end phase of a turn in which it was special summoned. This made actually getting Obelisk on the field a little difficult, since finding a convenient workaround to the war god's high tribute cost meant you'd lose your divine attacker if you failed to end the game that turn. But this trickiness wasn't quite enough to dissuade people from using an untargetable huge attacker whose summon could not be negated. Obelisk's additional effect to tribute 2 monsters to destroy all of your opponent's monsters wasn't bad either, but wasn't the main reason he was used. Although if you were special summoning Obelisk the Tormentor for its Raigeki effect, you could use itself as one of the tributes since it'll leave the field by the end of the turn anyway. Decks like Frog OTK and Dragon Rulers that could generate and sustain the field with advantage necessary to commit Obelisk found the most use for the war god. Although usage would decline pretty heavily after Dragon Ruler decks were hit with major restrictions starting in 2014. Soon, the incremental advance of the extra deck would make sure even decks that could afford a copy of Obelisk the Tormentor would make wiser use of their on-field bodies instead. Why burn your normal summon in 3 monsters for 4,000 attack beatstick when you could generate absurd levels of advantage with link monsters while removing bricks from your main deck instead? Still, Obelisk has a huge advantage over the other gods. As the first to see release, it barely made the Edison format cutoff. Edison format time gates play to the ban list for March of 2010, meaning Obelisk just manages to squeak in with its promo appearance from 2 months earlier in January. Although the gods would be pretty much on their own for a long while, they would eventually see some legacy support, with much of Obelisk coming from the 2021 structure Egyptian god deck Obelisk the Tormentor, which included the Divine Beast support card Soul Crossing and Divine Evolution. It also was the first printing of Obelisk's specific attack spell, Fist of Fate, a quick play spell card that really delivered on Obelisk's prominence of eternal slumber. It couldn't itself be negated, but it could negate the effects of an opponent's monster before blowing it off the board. This effect didn't target, and would also prevent monsters with the name of the destroyed monster from activating their effects for the rest of the turn. And not just the activated effects. Fist of Fate disperses the lingering effects of that monster's name until the end of the turn. To illustrate, let's say your opponent has you in a very extreme Buster lock, where they have 2 copies of Buster Blader the Dragon Destroyer Swordsman, alongside 2 Buster Dragons. In case you've never tasted the sorrowful sting of the Buster Dragon Sword, here's the important stuff. The Buster Blader boss blatantly negates the activation of all dragons you control while locking them in defense position. Buster Dragon turns all cards on the field into dragons. If Obelisk is on the field, it won't be able to attack or activate its board clear, but you can use Fist of Fate to destroy one of either Blader or Dragon, which will then cause the other effect to be negated even though it wasn't the one destroyed. Also, if Fist of Fate is activated during the main phase, you can destroy all your opponent's spells and traps too, which is just fun. Divine Evolution was a normal spell imported from the manga that lets you target a divine beast or one of their wicked counterparts, giving that card negation immunity and a 1000 boost to both stats. Divine Evolution also gave its target the lingering effect that on attack declaration, your opponent would have to choose one of their monsters to send to the graveyard. Ironically, Obelisk kinda benefits the least of the primary gods from Divine Evolution, since it already carries partial protection in the form of its untarget ability. But the other card, Soul Crossing, is definitely worth a quick word. It's a quick play spell that can only be activated during the main phase that allows you to normal summon a Divine Beast monster by offering your opponent's monsters as tribute. This can let you dodge that steep summoning cost, but does come with costs of its own. Mainly, you can only activate one effect until the end of your next turn. Luckily, the effects of Divine Beast monsters don't count towards this constraint, but it's still a pretty hefty limitation. But Soul Crossing is an important Obelisk card even if it didn't actually first release in the Obelisk structure deck, because it actually depicts the rising of the war god in a reference to one of the most pivotal moments in the Duel Monsters anime. Obelisk the Tormentor was introduced when Seto Kaiba receded from Ishizu Ishtar during episode 52. Thrilled with its godly power, this card would become the catalyst for the Battle City tournament, which Kaiba threw to attract Merrick Ishtar and the Rare Hunters, who possessed the remaining two gods and wouldn't pass up the chance to expand their powerful collection. Throughout the season, Kaiba would obsess over the strength of the gods, doggedly tracking their use and advancing his plot to obtain all three. Despite Kaiba's confidence, Ishizu maintained that the day would come when Kaiba would return Obelisk to her. Kaiba disagreed, but she had already seen this future written with relative certainty in a vision from her Millennium Necklace. Maniacal with power, she witnessed Kaiba use the magic of Soul Exchange to tribute her monsters to call forth his god in the Battle City Finals match. Unbeknownst to Kaiba, Ishizu's Zolga was infected by the trap Blast held by a tribute, which would topple the god, allowing Ishizu to reclaim her prize by leveraging Kaiba's ego. But Kaiba, having no respect for rules, destiny, or anything that would constrain him, experienced a vision of his own courtesy of Yami Merrick's Millennium Rod, which was originally owned by Seta's ancient counterpart. In the vision, Kaiba sees a version of himself carrying the body of a woman before the tablet of a great dragon, and coming back to the present, decides to alter his strategy to honor his time-lost dragon girlfriend. He sacrifices Obelisk to bring out his forever ace, the Blue Eyes White Dragon. Confronted with a force stronger than fate, Ishizu is defeated, although the illusion of her victory is referenced by the card Blast held by Destiny, whose artwork shows the phantom reality that never was, where the bomb within Obelisk ignited. Obelisk the Tormentor actually got another piece of major legacy support in 2022's Tin of the Pharaoh's God, Soul Energy Max, which is a normal trap that gives Obelisk access to one of his major anime moves, where by absorbing 2 sacrifices, it can destroy all of your opponent's monsters by dealing 4,000 damage. This card also helps with the War God's consistency by banishing itself from the grave during the main or battle phase to search Obelisk from deck and immediately normal summon it if you have the required tributes. There's one more piece of Obelisk support from this same tin to talk about, and that's the Breaking Ruin God. A quick play spell that cannot be negated, the Breaking Ruin God special summons Obelisk from your hand or graveyard and confers total effect immunity from your opponent's cards for the rest of the turn. Then, if you tribute 2 or more cards to activate an effect while you control Obelisk the Tormentor, note this condition is met by Soul Energy Max, you can banish the Breaking Ruin God from your graveyard to banish all monsters in your opponent's grave, burning their life points for 500 times the number of monsters removed. Despite all of this very cool legacy support, it just isn't enough to let the god see competitive play in the modern game. Decks like Snake Eyes and Labyrinth and basically any other meta deck are just going to outperform it. Still, Obelisk does punch above much of the other gods because it did have a period of competitive relevance, and is a threat that duelists will need to be aware of when playing in Edison format. The smell of ozone and sulfur fill the air as a faint alchemical pop precedes a cloud of sizzling smog. Emerging from the smoke to claim the number 8 spot on this list is Crowley, the Magistus of Grimoires. While initially carrying a dark attribute, this level 4 spellcaster with 1800 attack and 1000 defense from the 2020 set Genesis Impact can declare an attribute and then become it, giving it the innate access to become divine. The Magistus archetype chisels out the younger days for the many familiar faces from the spellcaster archetypes of Yu-Gi-Oh! 3 of the 4 main deck monsters are Endymion, the Magistus of Mastery, Riliona, the Magistus of Vari, and Crowley, the Magistus of Grimoires. These are younger forms of Endymion the Master Magician, Witchcrafter Madame Vera, and Alistair the Invoker. These three magical players would establish their own cores of power, with Endymion seeking total control of all magic from his magical citadel of Endymion, while Riliona operates a guild of skilled magical craft witches on the Witchcrafter by-street. Crowley would meanwhile continue to commune with powers from other dimensions at cost of his own mind and body. This, however, would not be the end, as in time Alistair's consciousness would return with secret knowledge, which would lead him to establish the Order of Prophecy, and at their base, the Grand Spellbook Tower. But what happened that led to this fracturing of the former magical colleagues? What went wrong in Crowley's head? Meet Zoroa, the Magistus of Flames. He's probably not as familiar as the rest because he's not going to survive this shared archetype prequel. He does kind of look like the legendary Flame Lord, but like many forms of forbidden magic, Endymion derides this as heresy. Basically, Crowley's sentient staff and interdimensional contact, Iwis the Magistus spell spirit, shares with its chosen wizard the Book of Law, which includes many rituals, including the Tris Magistus. Together, the cohort conduct the Magistus Theurgy with Zoroa at the center, their point of contact with Vahram the Magistus Divinity Dragon. The meeting of these two is shown in Magistus Virtua, and the ceremony eventually creating the empowered Zoroa the Magistus Conflagrant Calamity. What happens next is unclear, but it ends with the death of Zoroa and the splintering of the Magistus. Alarmed by the danger of wild power, Endymion gets into politics, seeking control. Unimpressed with Endymion's fear and maybe a little addicted to magic, Crowley would take his own route. The Magistus playstyle centers around calling out powerful beings from the extra deck that often have both monster effects and effects that apply when they are equipped to other monsters. This can be seen as indicative of the relationship between summoner and entity, where the extra-dimensional guest bestows power on their contact within the realm. Crowley's major role is as an extender, since he's able to banish himself from the graveyard to equip a Magistus boss from grave to another Magistus monster on the field. Used with Artemis the Magistus Moon Maiden, this can result in recurring searches, which is pretty cool. While Crowley's attribute swapping effect doesn't have a role within the Magistus cards, it does foreshadow his days to come as an elemental invoker, able to call creatures from various planes by fusing himself with a monster of a specific attribute. Although Crowley, the Magistus of Grimoires, has not seen any notable competitive experimentation, it's still a decently statted level 4 normal summon that can chameleon into any attribute without restriction and act as a decent extender within its deck. Being the Winged Dragon of Ra is a spectrum from sphereness to going into Immortal Phoenix mode, and having covered one aspect of rawness at the start of this list, it's time we took things in the other direction. Blazing into a hot number 7 spot on this list is the Winged Dragon of Ra Immortal Phoenix, a level 10 divine beast of divine attribute with 4,000 attack and defense that was released as an ultra rare in 2016's Millennium Pack. The Immortal Phoenix cannot be normal summoned or set, and must be special summoned by its own effect. This effect is triggered when the Winged Dragon of Ra in its base form is sent to the graveyard while Immortal Phoenix is already in your grave. You'll have access to Immortal Phoenix until the end phase, when, like other special summoned gods, it will leave the field. If this was all, then its limitations would be pretty disappointingly mortal for the Immortal Phoenix. But there is a little more. Narratively, the Immortal Phoenix is not dead, but dormant, as when it sends itself to the graveyard, it special summons a copy of the Winged Dragon Raw Sphere mode from hand, deck, or grave, ignoring its summoning conditions. The cycle of Raw can continue on your next turn if Sphere mode is still hanging around. But what can you do for the turn that you have Immortal Phoenix? Well, it's got that powerful 4,000 attack, which is sweet, but it also has one of the most godly effects in Yu-Gi-Oh! Immortal Phoenix is unaffected by other card effects, and your opponent cannot activate cards in response to its self-summon graveyard effect. Solemn Judgment is pretty godly as a counter trap, but even it cannot stop the ascension of the Immortal Phoenix. When it's on the field, the Winged Dragon of Ra Immortal Phoenix can pay 1,000 life points to send another monster on the field to the graveyard. This neither targets nor destroys, and can't be negated since Immortal Phoenix is immune to effects, meaning that as long as you have life points to keep fireballs blasting, Immortal Phoenix can clear your opponent's board for a chance to hit with its hefty 4,000 attack. If this card, and importantly its later support, had come out before 2016, it might have seen play. It might have even been good, but the Duel Monsters gods must be distant and cold, for it didn't, and it isn't. While no one will dispute the strength of the Immortal Phoenix on the field, it's a very difficult card to actually set up. You need it in the grave, and then you'll need to summon the Winged Dragon of Ra, which cannot be special summoned, and requires 3 tributes to normal summon. Then you'll have to get Ra off the field, which is easy at least, if you have 1,000 life points to burn for its effect, but that's still another step. Later support makes this easier, particularly the True Sun God, a continuous spell that searches the Winged Dragon of Ra, or a card that mentions it on activation, and can also send a copy of Immortal Phoenix from deck to the graveyard to send the Winged Dragon Raw on the field to the grave, which will then trigger the Immortal Phoenix effect. You can even send the True Sun God as a cost in place of the copy of Immortal Phoenix if it's already in the grave, which makes for some nice insurance against playing yourself. Unfortunately, the True Sun God didn't release until 6 years after Immortal Phoenix with the 2022 tin in the Pharaoh's Gods. If the power level of the game had frozen upon Immortal Phoenix's 2016 debut, then maybe the True Sun God and the Raw cards would have made the Winged Dragon of Raw Immortal Phoenix competitively viable. But we don't have to engage in apologetics from the Egyptian gods of Yu-Gi-Oh! They're just not the best. Except for in Duel Links, where the Winged Dragon of Raw Immortal Phoenix was an appropriately fearsome beast. But how can a card that's already difficult to use thrive in a format with a smaller starting hand and a condensed field? Well, the same way lots of difficult cards get good in Duel Links, with a broken skill. Added to coincide with the Phoenix Blaze main box that released the Winged Dragon of Raw Immortal Phoenix on December 31st, 2023, the Yami Merrick skill Immortal Sun God took what would have been a gimmicky, bricky deck and made it something to be feared. It gives you access to 2 effects that can be used once per duel, and can even be activated on the same turn. First, you could send the Winged Dragon of Ra or a card containing its name from your hand to the graveyard to search the Winged Dragon of Ra or a card containing its name, or Monster Reborn from your deck, and either add it to your hand or mill it to the graveyard. This effectively turned every Ra card into a starter, giving this deck no archetypal bricks at all. For its second effect, if you have the Winged Dragon of Ra or one of its forms in the field, you can fetch Monster Reborn from your graveyard at no cost. Finally, this skill does have one blanket restriction, in that any sphere mode you control, not special summon this turn, is banished during your end phase. But who cares about that? Ready your glass cannon, because this skill is all about one thing: ending the game in one turn. On the field, Immortal Phoenix is way better in the Duel Links format than the TCG because of the lower starting life point total. In Duel Links, players start with 4,000 life points, which happens to be exactly Immortal Phoenix attack. Also, that gives you fuel for at least 3 activations of Immortal Phoenix's effect, if your opponent hasn't chipped you for anything yet. The smaller field and starting hand actually helps serve Ra here, because you're more likely to be able to clear your opponent's board and immediately attack for a game. Since your opponent won't be able to stop Ra, their only hope of survival is to protect themselves with cards like Rainbow Life, or interfere with the summoning of Ra with cards like Necro Valley and Abyss Dweller. While effects can't be activated in response to Immortal Phoenix, you can prevent it from activating it at all with floodgates that lock your opponent out of the graveyard. Countering Ra is worth knowing how to do if you're climbing the Duel Links ladder, because Immortal Phoenix is like the access code talker of Duel Links. If you get on the field, you're probably going for game. This card had a few appearances in the Battle City arc of the Duel Monsters anime as the final ace monster of this seasonal antagonist, Yami Merrick. One fascinating aspect to the Immortal Phoenix is that the original Merrick Ishtar was unaware this awakened formed, despite holding both the Winged Dragon of Ra and the Millennium Rod for an extended period of time, and the Phoenix wouldn't reveal itself until Yami Merrick's match against Joey Wheeler. Deep in the black morass where Vengeful Bog Spirit dwells lurks the number 6 spot on this list, Swamp Mirror. Releasing as both a common and Shatterfoil rare in Battle Pack 3 Monster League in 2014, Swamp Mirror might never have been a force of the competitive scene, but it does land in the middle of this list of gods. Swamp Mirror is a trap monster, which means it must be set in the back row before it's summoned. Upon activation, Swamp Mirror advances to a monster zone as a normal monster with 1800 attack and 1000 defense. Its typing and attribute are variable, meaning you can hit the field as whatever you declare, meaning it has at the center of its swampy heart the potential to unleash itself as a divine attribute divine beast. In this way, Swamp Mirror continues a theme of swamp as a primal place where creatures can take the shape they please. Beast King of the Swamp establishes this theme as an amorphous monster which can substitute as a monster for any fusion summon, a narrative reinforced by King of the Swamp, which can also substitute a fusion material in addition to searching out polymerization. Mud Dragon of the Swamp is a common super polymerization target which requires 2 generic materials of matching attribute and diverging type, meaning you're likely able to fuse it with only bodies from your opponent's board. Swamp Mirror's adaptive attribute and typing continues this theme, which conjures an image of the primordial ooze that gave rise to the first land-based life. In many ways, the ancient swamp is our cradle, and the Swamp Mirror perhaps a form of progenitor life that holds within its undefined self the roots of biotic specialization. Sadly, this doesn't really translate to competitive play, since 2014 was way too late for a trap monster with no advantage generating effect to be any good. But in Duel Links, Swamp Mirror released relatively early with the card pool and was much more constrained. Although it lacked the utility of Tiki Soul and Tiki Curse for full trap monster decks, it did outperform the other trap monsters like Embodiment of Apophis, and was easily available from the card trader. Swamp Mirror would even see a smidge of competitive viability in some TG decks, which combined the Tech Genius engine with the Paleozoic Disruption and defense. The final component to the strategy was the trap card Survival's End, which destroyed normal monsters on the field to summon the same amount of dinosaur monsters from the deck. This boosted consistency by providing a way to call TG Booster Raptor directly from deck, and synergized doubly with Swamp Mirror. Since the creature from the swamp was treated as a normal monster on summon, it could be used as a pop fodder for the first effect of Survival's End. Then, since Survival's End also lets you banish itself from the graveyard to destroy both a dinosaur you control and a card belonging to your opponent, you could use Swamp Mirror to ignite that effect. This carved Swamp Mirror a really cool niche utilizing all of its specific qualities, which is why it's in the upper half of this list. The heavens twist and the thunders roar, signaling the coming of this ancient creature and the dawn of true power. Slifer the Sky Dragon is the number 5 pick on the final play-legal Egyptian god to release into the TCG. Like Obelisk and Ra before, Slifer was originally available as a Shonen Jump exclusive. In January 2012, Shonen Jump Alpha launched the digital successor to the print edition of Shonen Jump, which had previously circulated monthly in America and Canada. Slifer, a level 10 divine beast like the other gods, would enter the TCG as the promo card for their July 12, 2012 issue, and would find wider release in 2013's Battle Pack 2, War of the Giants, and Mosaic Rarity. Slifer the Sky Dragon is an interesting card. While it hasn't seen much in the way of competitive success at the time of the script writing, it does have a very unique disruptive effect. It'll probably never see serious play since Slifer shares many of the Divine Beast's flaws. The high 3 tribute for its cost, the requirement that it must send itself to the grave during the end phase of its special summon, and those are some pretty serious flaws. Especially since Slifer's strength shows when you can keep it on the field. It's got question mark attack and defense, where its stats are equal to the number of cards in your hand times 1,000, which is kind of goofy, but fine because you'll generally want Slifer for its effect and not its points. And here's the effect. Every time your opponent summons a monster in attack position, that monster will lose 2,000 attack points. If it causes it to drop to 0, Slifer destroys it. While far from an unbreakable lock, if your opponent can't immediately out-Slifer, this can be kind of tricky to play around, especially since Link monsters don't have access to defense mode and must eat Slifer's lightning. The major downside here is that because Slifer lacks any form of inherent protection, if your opponent has any kind of monster removal or effect negation, they won't have to deal with Slifer's inconvenience for long. This unfortunate fragility was likely the impetus behind the revived Sky God, a piece of Slifer support from the 2022 tin of the Pharaoh's Gods. This non-negatable normal trap revives Slifer from the graveyard and allows both players to draw until they have 6 cards in hand. While you're unlikely to get too much mileage out of Slifer's destruction effect this way, it can give you a 6,000 attack behemoth, and perhaps more importantly, draws and options. If you're activating during your opponent's turn, your best move is probably to save this card until the battle phase if you can, since that way they'll have a smaller window to use whatever advantages they draw into, on top of having to contend with a massive stat stick. But if you're played a lot of hand traps and are low on cards, there's a good argument for activating the revived Sky God as early as possible if you can outdraw your opponent. This trap also comes with a graveyard effect where it banishes itself to search monster born from your deck or grave and place it on top of your deck. Then, if you have a Divine Beast in grave, you can immediately draw it. Although this card interacts with Slifer in fun and interesting ways, like Soul Energy Max with Obelisk, it's not good enough to escape its fate of being just another piece of legacy support. Same goes for the quick play spell that embodies Slifer's Thunder Force attack. Released in the 2021 structure Egyptian God deck Slifer the Sky Dragon, this spell lets you destroy all of your opponent's monsters if you control Slifer the Sky Dragon. If you activate Thunder Force attack during the main phase, then you can draw cards equal to the number of monsters cleared by its resolution, at the cost of only being able to attack with one monster during your battle phase. This might be worth it for the cards, but also for the big swing for game if you're able to pick up enough cards to supercharge your Slifer. This is a pretty strong spell, but like Slifer itself, it is both powerful and fragile. Even if you clear your opponent's monsters from the board, unless you've got other powerful locks like anti-magic arrows and mind drain, all your plans can be stopped by one magic cylinder or even Sphere Karibo. To its credit, and like the revived Sky God that would be released later, the Slifer structure deck did try to address Slifer's vulnerability with the continuous trap Ultimate Divine Beast. On enemy attack declaration, Ultimate Divine Beast can be activated by discarding a spell or trap to summon a Divine Beast from your grave in defensive position, redirecting your opponent's attack to that card. This is nice, even if the activation requirements are a little specific. But Ultimate Divine Beast also has the effect to destroy all cards in your opponent's field that activate and affect this turn during the end phase, if you do still control Divine Beast monster. It's another cool, flashy move that's kind of awkward to pull off, of which the paper fragile gods have no shortage of. It even kinda synergizes poorly with other generic Divine Beast support, like Soul Crossing, since you'll be tributing cards that Ultimate Divine Beast would potentially destroy if you manage to get your god out another way. Slifer the Sky Dragon made its summoning debut in episode 65 of the Duel Monsters anime during a duel between Yami-Yugi and a rare hunter called Strings, an appropriate name since Merrick Ishtar spent the entire duel using him as a mind puppet, making this arguably Yugi's first clash against Merrick himself. The deck used by American Strings focused on filling the field with slime tokens from the Jam Breeding Machine with a Revival Jams plus Jam Defender combo to protect those tokens until enough had been assembled to pay the tribute for Slifer the Sky Dragon. Never having faced an Egyptian god directly by this point, the pharaoh was briefly overcome by the power of the creature, almost slipping into despair. Luckily, Seto Kaiba showed up with some backhanded words of encouragement. This brought Yugi out of a slump and ultimately prompted him to defeat Slifer with some serious brain control shenanigans that caused Slifer to destroy Revival Gem in an infinite loop that terminated when Strings ran out of cards to draw from card to save return, giving Yugi the match and the God card. Yugi would go on to use Slifer against Yami Bakura and Merrick during the Battle City Finals, as well as Seto Kaiba. Much later, the Avatar of the Pharaoh would use Slifer to engage Thief King Bakura's Diebound during the Millennium World arc, and again during the ceremonial duel between Yu-Gi-Moto and the Pharaoh Atem. And it seemed that would mirror the conclusion of the Duel Monsters anime in some ways. Yu-Gi-Moto and Jaden Yugi's duel to close out Yu-Gi-Oh! GX would end with the summoning of Slifer. Faced with the god's crackling power, Jaden would feel excitement rather than fear, a rekindling of the passion for dueling that had motivated him before the stakes and complications of the wider world took his thoughts down a darker path. Slifer's name is kind of unique amongst the Egyptian gods. The Winged Dragon of Ra and Obelisk the Tormentor both have obvious ties to ancient Egypt, and Slifer's OCG name does too, roughly translating to Sky Dragon Osiris. The Slifer part of Slifer's name is a tribute to writer and producer Roger Slifer, who co-produced the first season of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime with 4Kids Entertainment. And at number 4 on this list, we have Dimensional Allotrope Varis, a level 1 psychic tuner with no attack or defense. It was part of 2024's set Photon Hypernova and was printed with a light attribute, although its actual elemental typing will prove quite malleable. Having 0 attack and defense isn't the best, but a lot of really useful cards share that stat line. So let's see what this card brings to the table, or doesn't bring, since this is a worst of list. Varis has a very simple effect. Once per turn, you can declare an attribute. Varis then becomes that attribute until the end of your opponent's next turn. This meshes well with Varys' other effect, in which that it cannot be destroyed by battle with the monster that shares its attribute. So, that's kind of okay, right? Summon Varis and declare the correct attribute so it doesn't get picked off by battle, giving you time to summon another monster in synchro. That's probably the idea, but it's not really a good one. If you use your normal summon on Varis, giving it partial battle immunity isn't going to protect your life points since it has 0 attack. That's just letting your opponent attack directly with extra steps. You can set Varis semi-safely if your opponent is running a dedicated light deck, but can you even? Varis still loses to 1 attack from the Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon, which means you're not even safe from setting it in Master Duel in low level Silver. As a level 1 Psychic Tuner, Dimensional Allotrope Varis is a viable target for both 1-for-1 and Emergency Teleport, but even in the specific niche of level 1 Psychic Tuners, it's outclassed in multiple ways by a surprising number of cards, including Psyreflector, Mindmaster, Psyframe Gear Beta, and Recover. And here's the real kicker. Varis is on this list for its innate ability to become Divine, and that pretty much is the worst way to use Varis, since Divine is the least populous attribute and the gods see almost no competitive play. Still, you could argue that one might find marginally more utility for Dimensional Allotrope Varis in their deck than some previous cards on this list like Swamp Mirror. But the highly specific, seemingly unimportant qualities of Swamp Mirror managed to give it the smallest but still crucial competitive niche in a bonafide Duel Links meta deck variant. Dimensional Allotrope Varis qualities have garnered nothing for it, at least not yet. Almighty protector of the sun and sky, I beg of thee, please heed my cry. Transform thyself from orb of, you get it, spirit sing a powerful creature that rules over all the mystics, and our number 3 pick, the Winged Dragon of Ra. Like Obelisk and Slifer before it, Ra is a level 10 Divine Beast monster with a Divine attribute. It has question mark attack and defense, and was released in the TCG the same way as the other 2 gods, a promotion with Shonen Jump. Ra's initial printing with the January 2011 edition of Shonen Jump was compounded by another limited release alongside Effect Veiler as one of the 2 promo cards to come with a special edition of the 2012 set Order of Chaos. While Battle Pack 2 or the Giants in 2013 would make it easier to obtain a copy of the Winged Dragon of Ra, the alleged strongest of the Egyptian gods did not see competitive experimentation to match its powerful reputation. The Winged Dragon of Ra is easily the worst of the 3 core gods, and the complicated tangle of support required to make this card even remotely playable is on the level of Malefics. When it hits the field, the Winged Dragon of Ra's question mark stats start at 0, but you have the option to pay life points until 100 remain to have Ra gain attack and defense equal to the amount paid. Once Ra is on the field, you can pay 1000 life points to target and destroy a monster on the field. This effect can be repeated as many times as you have the life points to pay for, a number that will automatically be 0 if you choose to give Ra any attack points. The Winged Dragon of Ra is incredibly poorly designed, but don't start worrying about that before you've summoned it, because it's as hardy on the field as it is bad once it's there. Obelisk the Tormentor and Slifer the Sky Dragon can be special summoned even if they'll send themselves to the graveyard shortly after. Ra, on the other hand, can't be special summoned at all, and must be normal summoned by offering 3 tributes. As things stand, Ra's taking number 3. But without the legacy support it would eventually receive, it would probably sit at number 1. The Winged Dragon of Ra Sphere Mode and the Winged Dragon of Ra Immortal Phoenix are corrective cards to try and make the OG god less bad, and to that end, they succeed by being objectively better cards on their own. When Sphere Mode summons Ra from the deck, the Great Dragon hits the field with 4000 attack and defense, which can then be compounded by its life point drain effect if you decide you don't need its removal. The Winged Dragon of Ra Immortal Phoenix improves Ra removal by making it neither target nor destroy, because as things stand, the Winged Dragon of Ra's activation is as slow, reactable, and negatable as effects come. Much of the modern support for Ra would release in the 2020 set Legendary Duelist Rage of Ra, which featured retrains and support for many other cards used by Yami Merrick in the anime. We've already discussed the True Sun God in previous Ra entries, but here's a quick overview of all the other cards that support Ra. Millennium Revelation can discard a Divine Beast, search a copy Monster Reborn, and undo Ra's special summoning restrictions so that you can actually use Monster Reborn to bring it out. Sun God Unification expands your options for defensive life point manipulation with Ra, able to tribute it away to restore your lost life points. Ancient Chant searches Ra, gives you an extra tribute summon, and addresses Ra's stats problem by importing its anime effect to gain the sum of the attack and defense of its tributes. Guardian Slime is a level 10 Water Aqua defensive hand trap that gives you easy access to Egyptian god Slime and searches a spell or trap mentioning the Winged Dragon of Ra when it's sent to the graveyard. Like Fist of Fate and Thunder Force Attack, Ra also gets a quick play spell for its signature attack, Blaze Cannon, which helps Ra emulate its finishing blow from the anime. Interestingly, Blaze Cannon can be searched by Volcanic Rocket, since it's always treated as a Blaze Accelerator card. There's also Dark Spell Regeneration, a normal trap from shortly before Legendary Duelist Rage of Ra that provides another way to trade your Monster Reborn to revive the Winged Dragon of Ra. Like Sphere Mode in Phoenix, the Winged Dragon of Ra was an important presence throughout the Duel Monsters anime, and the Battle City arc in particular. Although its reputation would cause it to be mentioned many times prior, its first appearance was actually during Yami Merrick's match against Mai Valentine in the Battle City Finals. After wrestling control of the Winged Dragon of Ra Sphere Mode from Mai by reciting the Ancient Chant, the final Divine Beast made its official anime debut, and the first thing it did was launch its Blaze Cannon straight into Joey Wheeler's back. The Winged Dragon of Ra would again appear in the clash between Yami Merrick and Yami Bakura, before at last revealing its Immortal Phoenix form in Merrick's match against Joey Wheeler. It would later be used alongside the other gods by the Pharaoh Atem against his vessel Yugimoto during the final ceremonial duel. Despite the Winged Dragon of Ra's TCG summoning restrictions, Yami Merrick would often summon his god from the graveyard using Monster Reborn, which would inspire the direction of much of the modern Ra support. It is interesting to note that in the anime, no one who normal summoned Ra, including Mai Valentine, Yami Bakura, and Yami Yugi, actually won the duel where they called on the god. Ascending to the number 2 on this list of bad gods is Holactie, the Creator of Light. This level 12 divine monster with question mark attack and defense is the only card to date with the Creator God type, and hasn't released yet into the TCG, despite getting a limited OCG printing in 2011. But even in the OCG, this card is hard to come by since only 10,000 copies ever entered circulation. With artwork designed by Takashi himself, Holactie was released as a limited promotion to commemorate the special V-Jump book Dual Art Kazuki Takahashi Yu-Gi-Oh! Illustrations. Duelists could claim their chance of attaining Holactie the Creator of Light by submitting tickets they received from a few different outlets. These tickets were made available to V-Jump and Weekly Shonen Jump subscribers, as well as to those who purchased a copy of Dual Art or Structure Deck Dragonic Legion. The final source of tickets was the episode of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal anime to air on December 19, 2011, the English title for which was Bad Developments Part 2, although the much cooler and longer Japanese title roughly translates to The Power to Cut Open the Future, King of Wishes, Hope Ray. Only a certain number of tickets were distributed through each avenue, with 4,000 assigned to readers of V-Jump, Weekly Shonen Jump, and Dual Art, and 3,000 given to purchasers of Dragonic Legion and anime viewers respectively. But if you can actually get a copy of Holactie, what does it take to win? On a related note, what does it take to make an instant win card bad? Well, by now, Konami's pretty good at that. Check out Vennominaga, the deity of poisonous snakes, and Flying Elephant. But Holactie, the Creator of Light, is a little different from other instant win cards. Instead of fulfilling a convoluted mechanic while it's on the field to get the good stuff, if you can summon Holactie at all, the game is yours. It can't be normal summoned, of course, because that would be too easy. Holactie must be special summoned from your hand by tributing a copy of Obelisk the Tormentor, Slifer the Sky Dragon, and the Winged Dragon of Ra. When the three gods unite, the game is over. But the gods can't seem to agree on what they want. Whereas Obelisk's playstyle is a beat-down offense, Slifer has a more defensive control orientation, and the Winged Dragon of Ra revolves around a hyper-aggressive OTK. Meanwhile, Holactie strats are all about generating field advantage and deep drawing to win on your first turn. Before the advent of Legacy Divine Beast support, this was nigh impossible to pull off, requiring at least 6 bodies on the field before factoring the cards needed to find your specific card names, and getting them on the field. The gods better be on your side if your goal is summoning Holactie, because you've got a Skull Servant's chance in the Shadow Realm of seeing that miracle. With the new waves of Divine Beast support, a Holactie win becomes a little bit more doable. Marginally. Maybe. Conceptually. But realistically, it's just not going to happen particularly often. Prayers to Holactie tend to go unanswered. If you need a janky OTK, you're better off summoning Geldagra, Yugioh Mind August, and musical sumo dice games, or Ghost Trick Angel of Mischief. In the Duel Monsters anime, Holactie the Creator of Light had one major appearance at the climax of the Millennium World arc. Upon discovering his true name, the Pharaoh Tim was able to revive his vanquished gods and fuse them into Holactie, an entity strong enough to finally dispel the manifested Demon Lord Necrophades. Hey, remember back at the beginning of this list when I mentioned there was one other Yu-Gi-Oh card with question mark stats but no conditions for determining the actual values? That's Holactie. And realizing its potential in this list at number 1 spot is Quantum Cat, a level 4 continuous trap monster with 0 attack and 2200 defense. It has no specified attribute and type, but can be activated by declaring an intent for both categories. Quantum Cat then lands on its feet on the field with a type and attribute to match, making it also capable of molding itself into a divine attribute Divine Beast. Quantum Cat released in 2014's Battle Pack 3 Monster League, where, like Swamp and Mirror, it could be found in both common and Shatterfoil rarities. Quantum Cat and Swamp and Mirror are ultimately pretty similar cards. They both are level 4 trap monsters of variable classifications that are treated as normals once they advance to a monster zone. The biggest difference between the two is that Swamp and Mirror can actually attack. 2200 defense is decent for a low-level monster, but isn't really worth writing home about when trap monsters offer cards like Apophis the Swamp Deity, Statue of Anguish Pattern, and the First Monarch. But making a good defensive trap monster is more difficult than making an offensive one anyway. It doesn't matter how glassy a cannon is as long as it can fire, but a trap monster's glass wall won't keep out a mystical space typhoon. Sure, Quantum Cat has fine defense, but it also has all of the vulnerabilities of a monster and a spell or trap card. But in Duel Links, Swamp Mirror outperformed it both in competition and acquisition. While Swamp Mirror was actually made instantly available from the card trader at 3 copies in March of 2018, Quantum Cat didn't come out until a month later, and then was locked at only 1 copy obtainable only by grinding Odeon to level 45. Copies of Quantum Cat were given away as one-off gifts during time-based campaigns in 2019 and 2020, and was finally made widely available by the Duelist Chronicle 5D's Fight for the Fortune Cup No. 2 event. Not only was this too late for Quantum Cat to be good, but it was always going to be too late. Always since a month before Quantum Cat began to trickle into the game after Konami had already crapped it with Swamp Mirror. The card Quantum Cat and its variable effect take inspiration from the Schrodinger's cat thought experiment. This paradox is designed to help illustrate the concept of quantum superposition, a principle explaining how a quantum state can be represented by a sum of possible conditions. The Schrodinger's cat experiment is like if you locked a stray cat inside an ancient gear box with dreamy Nimularia. When Nimularia wakes, stray cat is toast, but without opening the box, we have no way of knowing if Nimularia has woken up or not. This means we can't conclusively say whether stray cat has been banished yet or not. It occupies a superposition of two potential realities, one where Nimularia yet slumbers, and one where she is awake and the cat is gone. Alright, and that concludes the list. If you have more ideas for future videos just like this one, please let us know down in the comments below.